What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to Down to the Wire. I'm your host, Brian Costa, and we have got a lot to talk about on today's episode. It is going to be a very basketball-centric episode, as last night was game one of the NBA Finals, with the Boston Celtics getting the victory with a final score of 107 to 89. They go up 1-0 in the series, and we're going to discuss that from all sides, from Boston's perspective, Dallas's perspective, and also dive into some other NBA news revolving around the LA Lakers in their pursuit of UConn men's basketball coach Dan Hurley, and also talk about some WNBA news with the drama surrounding Caitlin Clark and Kennedy Carter. First of all, I want to welcome on today's guest to the show. He has been a featured guest on this program many times before, and I'm glad to have him back on again. He's one of my closest personal friends. So without any further ado, please welcome back John Warren to the show. John, glad to have you joining me here today.
Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So, John, obviously last night, major victory for the Celtics, leading by as much as 29 points in the game, an absolute offensive explosion in the first half. Just give me your takeaways from the game early on.
So, right away, right, the Celtics, blew them out, just unbelievable shooting. To start the
Yeah.
game, the Mavs went on a run to begin with, right in the first quarter, which kind of worried me. And then the Celtics came right back, and just their shooting was just phenomenal. To begin the entire series shooting like that is really something that you hope carries on. And it's kind of unexpected when you see it, game one right away, like kind of punch in the mouth. But it looks like the Celtics kind of utilized time to their side as well with Kristaps Porzingis going nuclear.
Yeah, he really did go off. I mean, finished with a final line of 20 points, 6 rebounds, and then 3 blocks. John, I thought that if I was to come on and do a show, we would be talking about him having maybe 8 points, a couple of boards, and we'd be saying, all right, yeah, he had a good, decent game in his first time back after 38 days of not playing since he suffered that calf injury against the Heat. Instead, he's one of the major contributors in this game, and realistically, without that first quarter, I don't know if we're having a different conversation today. I mean, the Celtics, all in all, were the better overall team in that game, but his contributions in that first quarter and first half in general were monumental. I mean, he was just making it felt like he was everywhere on the floor all at once. Just multiple blocks, especially that one on Irving, and then the chase down one that he had on Jones at the end of the quarter. It was just remarkable. It was one of the better quarters of basketball I've seen from a guy in a long time.
Yeah, he really just like coming off of like all that rest, like I saw something and may or may not be true, but it was like his first game back from actually playing against the Mavs to end it's like the first time I think since like the 29th, but he's been
Oh
out
yeah.
pretty much the whole playoffs. It was his first time out of the first round, I think,
Mhm.
playing a game in the NBA Finals at home court, with the Boston Celtics. And it really just shows that these pieces we picked up, like, really have been the difference maker. Like, Drew Holiday played phenomenal. Porzingis, after a slow start, even with Al picking up some of the slack, really just started. It seemed like I think he rattled off like 8 straight points. It was a super deep three. He had a great dunk to kind of start off his run. And then he was just hitting mid range after mid range right in these guys' faces, which to be as tall as he is and shoot as well as he can, and to his credit, also playing healthy and being healthy. He's a great player, and he fit really seamlessly right back into this like rotation we had going in the playoffs that I was more nervous about of how the other players would play with him at full speed, kind of fitting back in that piece that you have missed all playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I completely understand that. I mean, the fact that he hasn't played since the first round, and since he's gone out, this Celtics team has been able to rally around that and kind of found a new identity throughout this playoffs. Obviously, you're still going to go through your two-star players of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, but they were able to not reinvent themselves, but they were able to understand how to play without him. And you could have thought at one point, all right, if you throw him back in, is it going to be a case of maybe too many cooks in the kitchen? And it was the exact opposite of that. I think that, while I'll talk about Jason Tatum's overall performance, I think that while he didn't have the point totals that you would like to see from him in this game, he was able to recognize that Porzingis was just on a whole nother level and was able to defer to him, which as a star player is what you like to see when, he can recognize where the hot hand is and he's not going to be selfish just trying to take his own shots. He's going to supply his guys and make sure that they can, produce as well.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It seems like Tatum and these like when people compare him to all-star players and everything else at the end of the game, he did play 42 minutes. He was more of a distributor out there. Yeah, he kind of shot terrible and still took the most amount of shots and everything else. Could he have taken more? Yeah. Did he? No. He kind of recognized everything else and was really spreading out the ball. And with him on the court at the end of the day, he still had a plus minus and plus 19.
Yeah.
So I still think like even with like this kind you could say it was an off game for him, but at the same time he still distributed and everything else. And let's say he scored 30, then this is a monumental blowout and the Celtics are here to play. So being able to produce and also get like a 20-point win or whatnot and hold that lead and really keep it is really something Dallas really has to get a hold of.
Yeah, they definitely will need to get a hold of that. And, another player on this Boston Celtics team that they're going to need to try to figure out an answer for is Jaylen Brown. Of course, he led the team last night with 22 points, also had 6 boards, and also had 3 blocks. I was listening to post game radio, and you could actually hear they actually said to him, "So, Jaylen, when did you become a shot blocker?" And he kind of said something under his breath, and he goes, "I mean, man, I guess today." And I mean, it even kind of shocked him, but he was imposing his will all over the court throughout the game, and he was remarkable as well. A lot of people have given him crap for not being able to dribble and having kind of that bad left hand, but he was able to cross over and make some plays into traffic and had that ferocious dunk in the first half as well. So he was able to kind of figure some things out and was tremendous for them last night as well.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what you want to see out of Brown, especially with being, he was very highly criticized, especially over that large contract. But I think to a point, he's incredibly underrated. Like this team is so deep. You have 4 ball handlers, that can take the ball up the court in White, Holiday, Tatum, and Brown. And then, you got all the role pieces. Like Hauser had a great game. Defensively, he was really playing like solid, and so was Peyton Pritchard also for that aspect of really trying to lock up Luca and those kind of double move lobs to get dunks towards the
Yeah,
rim. And I mean,
no, I mean the defense played very well, and I think that a lot of that I know a lot of people will throw some slack his way, but I think you do have to give Joe Mazzulla some credit here on getting these guys ready for this game. Not just with the game plan of taking away the corner threes and the lob dunks that Dallas is so known for, but also the decision to have a guy like Kristaps Porzingis come off the bench, something he's only done once in his career before, as I learned from Brian Windhorst over on ESPN. And to make that decision for him, I think was so impactful because rather than get Porzingis kind of sped up, throw him out there for the tip off and have him get running from the jump, they were able to sit him down, let him kind of see how the game was going, and then go in when he was ready to and, dominate the way he was able to do that. Um, I guess the only thing going forward is, we talked about some of Tatum's quote unquote struggles, although that I think he played decently well in this game. Do you think, though, that if Jaylen Brown is the de facto kind of alpha in this series, do you think that he can lead Boston to a championship?
yeah, I mean, there's a big difference, and people love to get on the hype of Jason Tatum's overrated and everything else. And I really go back to the fact that the team is so well built. And I mean, Brad Stevens, looking at it this morning from ESPN as well. Um, in the trade to get Porzingis, we gave away Marcus Smart and we received 2 firsts along with Kristaps Porzingis, which a lot of people forget. We got also 2 firsts from that deal, which now is insane, especially with the season debut when he also went insane, just knocking down threes. But I mean, yeah, like the team is just so much like built like better. Like Luca, you and Kyrie, you have the star power, obviously. the Celtics do to as well. I mean, Luka is the best player on the court whenever he steps on it, to be fair. I mean, but it's like the team is just so deep, and I feel like regardless, I mean, of Jason Tatum, if he played like this every single night, I still would take the Celtics and, five or at this point if they keep rolling. Well, I mean, it's kind of crazy to say, but a final sweep.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about that in a second. I know that a lot of people have I mean, I've been listening to some Boston sports radio. I've been seeing stuff in the national news, everyone saying, quote, Celtics in 3, everyone thinking the series is over. We'll talk about that in just a second, but when looking at kind of Dallas's struggles in this game, the major factor will be when you take away this game, the major thing that a lot of people are going to look at is Kyrie Irving. He only finished this game with 12 points and was 6 of 19 from the field. What do you think kind of led to him just not being totally in sync for this game? Do you think it was the Boston crowd, or just what is your overall thoughts on that?
I mean, he was on the team with Brown and Tatum. I don't recognize I guess like him not being able to like have a bad like he's totally every player. I mean, even
Yeah.
Jason Tatum had a bad game. You could say Kyrie Irving like is going to have a great game next game. There's probably a likely chance that Tatum is as well. And I mean because these off nights don't come often. But I would say it's just more to him not being really able to get in his rhythm either. I mean, the Celtics were constantly switching. I mean, when you have, I guess, like Drew Holiday say, like we have white guys who can guard. Like when you have these guys that can really just like stress the floor, like a Peyton Pritchard, or saw him matched up with him a couple times or whatnot, really give him these hard defensive looks. And having Porzingis in there as your big and really putting up his arms. I mean, I just don't think that was something Kyrie I mean, it's really hard. I'm really trying to find a reason to. I mean, I just think he had an off night. Obviously, this is not going to continue. He's Kyrie Irving at the end of the day, one of the most skilled shooters and ball handlers of our generation. But I think it might have just been something with the crowd. Like it might have been the moment was too big, the lights were too bright. The Celtics, I mean, he was hitting a couple shots early, and then the Celtics just went on that run, got smacked, and I think he missed a few shots. And that to me as an athlete, that can get your rhythm off right away. If you go down early and then you're not hitting shots, you're not going to play as well. So
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with you there. I think that this won't be something that continues going forward, but coming into the series, Tatum and Irving, respectively, for each team, were probably the stars that had, I think, the most media pressure on them. They were getting probably a lot of the criticism from both teams. I mean, Tatum has been, if you're on NBA Twitter or just looking at the way that he's being talked about, everyone's saying that, oh, he's a choker. He lets his team down in the playoffs. He's not able to come through. So that's something that he's going to have to work through and try to produce more like he has in the regular season. In this last Pacers series, Brown went out and won the conference MVP, so he was the better player in that overall series. Although that Tatum did have a very nice game 3 performance. Um, I think also then looking at Kyrie Irving, I think that he'll figure some things out in this series. I think that it's not as much because people are going to want to say that the Boston crowd got to him and he got rattled. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I know that there were some talks about him having some sort of interaction with a fan during the game and, getting into some sort of an argument. I just think that Boston defensively took away a lot of the options that they like to go to. I know that they sometimes like to run the lob plays with Lively. He was basically a no-show in this game. And frankly, just the fact that they were able to shut down all of these other options, I think just limited what Kyrie Irving is able to do. And, when you take away the other secondary pieces for this team, because for Dallas, the main pieces are him and Doncic, when you take away those secondary pieces that he can dish out to and make plays with, then I think you run into issues, which,
right,
which I think
right.
looking at an overall bigger issue with the game for Dallas, Luka Doncic, who averaged 10 assists throughout these playoffs, was held to only 1 in this game.
Yeah,
And
and the team was held to 9.
yeah, and not only, and I mean, that's not really anything to fault with Doncic. He was making plenty of passes, but his teammates just weren't hitting the necessary shots.
Yeah, I mean, PJ Washington was literally Mr. Big Shot in the previous series, nailing and being incredibly clutch. And early on in the first quarter, he had two fouls
Mhm.
right away, and he picked up his third, I think, right almost right away, and he was in super early foul trouble, which doesn't help him. But yeah, I mean, the role players definitely, and you can see this throughout most series, they play better at home. So I'm really interested, for when the Mavs end up going home, how they're going to play and really overcome this pressure. I mean, I don't think this blowouts are going to continue. I think it'll be similar to the Pacers series where kind of regardless, like the team really wants to win and really is going to try, they're going to just keep going. But I think also you really need to point at the coach's perspective. I mean, I don't, Jason Kidd does not do well in game ones historically.
Mhm.
And also for me as a player, and this could go back to Kyrie Irving's shooting performance and the halftime at locker room just saying, hey guys, let's go out there. Let's just have fun. It's just basketball. When we're getting blown out, is probably not the best way, especially on game one of the finals, being like, guys, let's just have fun out there. Come on, we're in the finals. That I feel like is more like a first time kind of being there. And the Celtics have enough, guys on there who have been to the finals, been to the Eastern Conference championships and whatnot, that they know that they got to win. I mean, you got vets on that team that want to win now. Al Horford, and they're not going to let that slide. I mean, and then seeing after the game, seeing Jaylen Brown being like, guys, let's not get cocky, let's not get cute. Just game one, we got to keep going. They really want it, and it seems like they want it a lot more. And I mean, Luka, I mean, he's always going to complain to everyone else out there, but it didn't look like to me the other Mavs players really cared that much compared to the energy. And that could just be a home court advantage or whatnot, but looking at that is a big issue as well. And then, I mean, again, going back, it's Kyrie. I mean, like he also played terribly defensively. People like the Mavs were outscored 19-4 when Luka sat and Irving was on the court.
Mhm.
Like Luka had that huge third and they cut it down to 8. And that's when I know I don't Brian, you probably thought this as well, but it was reminding me of the Heat series and stuff like that, being like, oh yeah, we're gonna win this game. Oh no, what are we doing in the Hawks games as well? I mean,
Yes.
we didn't do it much, and we've only lost 4 home games the entire year. But still, it's like stuff like that kind of is like gets me worried and being like, this is gonna be a lot harder series, and the role players and everyone else needs to step up, but still makes you think.
Yeah, I mean, it does make you think. And you had mentioned Jason Kidd's halftime speech. When I was watching First Take this morning and looking into some of that stuff, Udonis Haslam actually made a good point. It was something that I had kind of noticed during the speech, but didn't really think too much of. And it was that uh, during that halftime speech that you could hear on ABC, Kidd ends up saying, "Hey guys, like, what's going on?" And he cuts himself off before saying, we're playing like we've never been here before." And the truth is that besides him and Kyrie Irving, none of them have ever really been in a situation like that before. Kidd obviously won a championship with the Mavs in 2011, and then made a couple finals appearances with the Nets. But other than that, like, and Irving's experience with the Cavs, like, these guys don't have that level of experience in this type of a championship series. So I think that he had to walk back those comments and then turn it into like, guys, we're just playing basketball here. We just got to have fun. And there was kind of a little bit of a switch with that. So I did notice that. And then the other thing too, this overall series, I think that Dallas is definitely going to make a series out of this. I don't think that it's over like everyone's saying it's going to be a sweep. I think that, like we've seen, Boston has struggled historically in Game Two throughout this postseason, other than the Pacers series where they swept them. But I definitely think that they will make some noise going forward down the stretch of this playoff run.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, even looking at the previous opponents, um, like the Celtics, like as much as like the media and everyone, how they're all jumping on the Mavs side saying they played a really tough playoffs. And I mean, to their credit, they did. They played amazing. They also have not faced a Boston team like this that pretty
True.
much swept almost every single team. And what else can you ask for them if the star players are out?
Yeah.
I mean, just sweet, like pretty much giving up 2 games. You're gonna lose one to the Heat. That's a Celtics thing. And then losing, one more. Like it happens. Like that's totally normal. And going through these playoffs, like you do play who's in front of you, and the Celtics really prepared to do so. And it seems like the Celtics team at the same time is a lot different than the Timberwolves team that was also really highly regarded, led by Anthony Edwards, who had an amazing playoff run, and their team as well. The Celtics just seem to have, you could say like the greatest comparison is Kristaps Porzingis really being the X factor here and having like a true lockdown guy in Drew Holiday, and also having someone explosive yet consistent in Jaylen Brown. So I think that's the bigger issues I think, you know, they're running into as well from if I was, on the Mavs, like you're having Kristaps Porzingis who is incredibly better than Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert as he has the length and defensive as he showed when he blocked a dunk in the air of of Gobert and then going at him. And he can just also hitting super deep threes. He's hitting incredible mid ranges that Cat would miss. I mean, I think that's something that Dallas kind of just got smacked in the mouth a little bit as it kind of seemed like at the end of that run, the Timberwolves were kind of just walking through, walking through. So I think that's something I think Boston also really wanted to make a point.
Yeah, I think they did want to make a point, and I think that going into game two, they are going to have to deal with some adjustments that Dallas is going to throw at them. I know that Jason Kidd is doesn't really do well with adjustments. He more is like a rally the team kind of guy. But I think that, in the second half of the game, they did keep Porzingis a little more in check from the field. He didn't have as much of a explosion from, like on the actual like floor itself. I know that he still had some good defensive plays, but it wasn't nearly the offensive explosion we saw in that first half. So I think that they are going to have some sort of an answer for him. So you are going to need to see Jason Tatum step up a little bit more. And, it's really going to be kind of all up in the air at this point.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what would be your biggest kind of like going into game two? Like, what would the Mavs have to do, honestly, to really convince you that the Celtics aren't going to repeat the same and possibly end this thing really early, not take it 6 or 7?
Well, I think the big thing that they're going to have to do is they're actually going to have to legitimately go at Kristaps now, because I think that coming out of this game, they didn't like no one really knew what his health was going to look like. I think that everyone was saying, all right, we're going to give him some of these open shots, which you saw him get some mismatches on some smaller defenders down low, and he was able to expose those guys. I don't think you're going to see as many of those mismatches in game two, and that they're actually going to kind of guard that a little bit better. Will that leave guys like a Derek White or a Drew Holiday open? Potentially. Those guys are then just going to need to make their shots. So I think that Boston overall, I think that JJ Redick said it best that it's just a math problem. They have too many different offensive scoring options that, when it comes to guarding them, you just can't put all your eggs in one basket. So I think that, they're just going to have to really pick and choose. And I'd say they're going to have some sort of a better answer for Porzingis in game two. Tatum's going to need to, I think, step up. And I think that if they can do that, they can withstand game two and then go to Dallas and figure things out from there.
Right. Yeah. And I agree with that. I
Overall, though,
mean,
overall, though, where do you stand right now in this series? I know that some people were saying, oh, this thing could be a gentleman's sweep. If, like, depend on the way that you see this series going right now, where do you think, how many games do you think the eventual winner wins in?
I originally had the Celtics in 6 because I think this is a lot more experienced team and better team that will be able to. But at the end of the day, this team still kind of showed the flaws of the past with still letting up, like playing down to their opponent.
Yeah.
I mean, and really just like being like, hey, who cares? We're the Celtics. We're up by so much. And
I
it's
mean, you
like
I mean, you led by
getting
20.
lazy.
I mean, you led by 29 at one point and it got whittled down to 8 points. So
Right.
that's going to need to get figured out as well, because if you didn't have as much of a lead built up, we'd have had a much more competitive ball game, because although the Mavericks scored 89 points, which is I think the lowest that they've scored in playoff history, I think was the number that they got thrown out at the end of the broadcast. That's only because Jason Kidd took his starters off the floor. Neither team was trying at the end, and that's just what's going to happen in the final couple minutes of a blowout basketball game.
Right, and you kind of said it. I mean, the big thing I'm nervous about is Luka really just like going crazy and going nuts, which I
Mhm.
mean he does all the time,
Yeah.
and it's seen and why he gets all the MVP votes and why everyone praises him. And I mean, pretty
Yeah.
much it seemed like the entire national media, besides people in the local area, were on the Mavs to really like give this a shot because of the story, because of the star power and everything else. Well, the Celtics just have a really dense built team, and I think Missoula has learned enough from the last finals, I know, in calling timeouts when they're actually necessary, not just letting the guys just keep running and figure it out on their own and let it spiral and adjustments and whatnot. I think this team is a little bit more seasoned, and I think that comes with veteran leadership from, Drew winning, and being there before, and as well as Tatum and Brown knowing what it feels like to lose and how much it sucks and knowing what adjustments now they have to make and come up with. And I mean, realistically, I see Kyrie still doing his thing. I see Luka still doing his thing. This game, though, however, really just showed me that the Celtics are in fact serious about this finals. And I would say right now, I mean, I'm leaning more towards the gentleman's sweep. I don't see why not. We steal one in Dallas, win this one here. They're probably going to take one in game three, and we'll probably steal one right back and then close it out in Boston. Makes the most sense to me,
Mhm.
unless Kyrie Irving does exactly what he was saying of doing and coming back to Boston and going nuclear.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to take anything for granted. I think that uh, a lot of people expected Boston to take this game one. The fan base was gonna be hyped up. Everyone, they had the rest advantage. They had a lot of things playing in their favor. So I think that at the end of the day, I frankly right now would say maybe Celtics in six, depending on the way this is going. I think that uh, Dallas isn't going to have the type of games that you saw them playing. I think that, Luka Doncic, despite everyone kind of saying that even he had an off night and talking about the one assist, he still finished with 30 points and 10 boards. So he's still going to be like, even on what's considered an off night, he still puts up tremendous numbers. Now that's based on the fact that his teammates weren't producing on a certain level, but he still had great numbers in this game. So I think that you're still going to have to deal with him especially if he figures out some of those assists and gets those to connect more. And then Kyrie, I think that he'll probably have a 30-point game in some of these matchups as well. So I don't think the series is close to being over, but it's a good sign from the Celtics out to shoot.
I agree. Yeah. And I think one more thing before we move on would be just really the defensive kind of prowess that the Celtics had against the centers and role players, I think was highly underrated, especially with Dallas really just kind of switching, Gafford and Powell, and you're switching them a lot, and you're switching in Keebler, and you're also having Derek Jones Jr., and you're having all these guys just keep switching and switching, and it's just an assist kind of machine for Luka to keep throwing them at him. And they're two centers, I mean, who played unbelievably the rounds before of running around and just, playing balls to the wall, both sides of the court, and really just like running around defensively and gassing them out, kind of like the Celtics used to do back in the day with I'm forgetting on his name. He's a white center for the Celtics, but we would have this rotation of centers.
Cornette.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we would just throw these centers at them, and it was just an onslaught of Al Cornette and a couple others. You would just throw at Embiid, and it kind of reminds me of their way of kind of going in and doing that. And the Celtics were extremely effective about stopping that. And I think that led Kyrie and Luka to really just kind of throw up some tough shots. And well, Luka's Luka, so he's going to make a couple. But Kyrie, on the other hand, should have made a couple and he didn't. And I think that's the reason why it wasn't as close. But I think regardless, I mean, if the Celtics keep shooting like this, no team in the NBA can beat them.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll have to end up seeing how the series plays out, but those are our overall thoughts on that. Before we move on, I just want to say that if you guys are not following Down the Wire at this point, make sure you guys go follow us on all streaming platforms. We are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and more. You can also watch the video version of this show on our YouTube page, and you can follow along for updates on our Instagram at down.tothewire. Again, at down.tothewire on the IG. Before now, as we move on to the next piece of NBA news we have, this surrounds some things going on in the Northeast as well, as UConn head men's basketball coach Dan Hurley is reportedly in talks to become the next head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, the Lakers fired Darvin Ham at the end of this past season, and now trying to go after arguably the most coveted name in all of college sports. With Hurley being that guy. He's coming off back-to-back championship wins with the UConn Huskies, and he's got the shot to go for a three-peat right now. He'd be the only team to do so since the UCLA Bruins in the late 60s, early 70s. John, do you think that the Lakers can lure him away and get him to be their next guy?
Honestly, it's really up to him. I mean, it's really deciding on if they're really going to back up the Brinks truck. I mean, I know he's stated previously in some other interviews that he wasn't really ready to move on from UConn, and I think they're restructuring his deal as well at UConn to kind of sign him for like pretty much a lifelong deal after bringing these two championships and trying to, I believe they would be going for their seventh this upcoming year. And I don't know. I mean, his son has graduated as well. His son, that was a big reason why he was there. He wanted to see his son all the way through. He was a small school guy to begin with before coming to this UConn job. And then he kind of jumped up, got the UConn job. And I mean, his dad was a unbelievable coach. Like he's now kind of in this footsteps, and it's just a big deal, I think. And I think it's very understated, Brian, that jumping from the NBA to college and then back to the NBA and any sport, to be completely honest, is extremely difficult. I mean, you have these guys who are divas. You're going to have these guys who are on different levels. And with the NBA and college basketball, there are incredible differences in the type of players you're going to see, the type of defenses you're going to run. And on top of that, just like really the roster builds, everyone in the NBA can shoot. Everyone in the NBA can play defense to an extent. And you're going to have these absolute superstars who can do that as well. So to me, the biggest thing is, and I don't know if you saw this as well, Brian, but at UConn, it's the system, right? You had these guys who really just like had these role player guys. Like you're not really hearing a bunch of these guys going number one or number two in the NBA draft besides Donovan Klinging going probably top three in a weaker NBA draft this upcoming year. But I really don't know. I mean, if you throw, it's really what's your price tag because everyone has one.
Yeah. I mean, for Hurley, I think that unless the Lakers are willing to make him the highest paid coach in the league, which I think right now that's Steve Kerr. I don't know necessarily if they're going to budge, if he's going to want to budge, because I know that he just had Alex Caravan just said that he was going to come back to this team. And, I don't know how he does with the transfer portal and how the team is shaping up this year, but he did at least inform the team that he was going to speak with the Lakers and talk about a potential deal. So these are very real rumors. I know at first everyone was saying this is just fake. There's no way this is going to happen, but it is proving that this is really real. And, LeBron James, I think, as you said, does have an affinity for Dan Hurley. He does respect him as a coach, which
he stated publicly.
Yeah, which in LeBron's world is a very big thing. Like he's had some different challenges with coaches throughout his career. And the biggest thing, I guess, like you said, there is a challenge with adjusting from college to pro sports. We've seen it in the NFL with guys like Nick Saban, who went to the Miami Dolphins and, was mildly successful there, but then goes to Alabama and is essentially a god there now and is one of the best coaches of all time on the collegiate level. And
But yeah.
No, I know, but the only one that you could say would maybe be like Bear Bryant. But
no, I was just correcting you, Brian, on the greatest college football coach of all time from the University of Alabama.
Yeah.
But continue.
All right. Anywho, going on with that though. Sorry, I kind of going on with that. When talking about going into the college world and into the pro sports. One coach that was able to be somewhat successful with it from transitioning early on was Brad Stevens when he went from Butler to the Celtics. A major reason for that, though, was that the Celtics were extremely young when he took over that job and almost was a college operation for a long time, with just the fact that there were so many young pieces. However, once those pieces really started to mature and you had actual like star talent that demanded, actual attention and, needed to be treated as such, he stepped aside. They brought in Ime Udoka. Well, you know what happened with that. Now it's Joe Mazzulla. And, there's been some sort of an adjustment period. I don't know necessarily if Dan Hurley coming in, running his system, because everyone talks about the Hurley practices and the fact that he runs it like a drill sergeant. He's gonna be a hard ass. He's gonna get on you. Is that gonna fly with a guy like LeBron James? Is that gonna fly with a Anthony Davis? I'm not 100%. I think that LeBron James would welcome that. But something else that I wanted to show you, if it'll load, was this was a TikTok clip that I saw from CBS Sports just this morning, actually, and it was talking about LeBron in his interactions with former Cavs head coach David Blatt during the NBA Finals. Just take a listen to this. So I thought that was a very interesting clip to see. Just the fact that it shows the fact that LeBron wants to have control of an operation like that, and maybe that there was already something stemming with it with that head coach at that time, and he had some issues with him. But if LeBron wants to run a practice, is Dan Hurley going to be okay with that? I think that Dan Hurley sees himself as an alpha figure, and would maybe want to say, "Hey, this is my team. I want to run it my way." I don't know if LeBron's going to be. Oh, I don't know if LeBron's going to be all cool with that.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. I think LeBron, to a point, appreciates winning, and I think that's the biggest difference in between these coaches. Like when he was with Miami, I mean, had to be a certain connection and a talk with him and Pat Riley, going to the fact that Pat Riley would like literally kick Shaq off the team. Like
Yeah.
there has to be a level of respect there, and the fact that Dan Hurley is kind of this really old school hard ass coach that you don't see anymore. And on top of all that, in this new age of we see kind of this transition of players kind of becoming coaches in the NFL and the NBA, of that Dan Hurley, I mean, like at UConn would go up to fans yelling at him in the crowd and say, "All right, let's go. I'll fight you." And some like there's like a viral clips you can see definitely everywhere of Dan Hurley literally threatening the student fans, kind of being like, "You like that," and is with this insane energy of getting hyped up. I mean, in the finals this year, he was on the court and got on court violations when they were up by like 20,
Yeah.
being like literally pushing his players into place.
Yeah.
He's psychotic, and he's also extremely smart with his system, and he runs it as such because at the end of the day he just wants to see success. So it would have to be just something like that. I mean, of really just running an operation if he was to leave, which I mean is really just up to debate.
Yeah. For my next question, would you say it's a bigger factor to go be a head coach of a team with LeBron James on it, or to be head coach of the Lakers? What do you think is the bigger draw for him at this point?
I would say it would be the Lakers 100%. I mean, because even before LeBron there was Kobe, and still before all of that there was Magic. You had that little down period, but like it's like the being the head coach of the Boston Celtics or being the head coach of the Lakers are always around, and people always talk about the Lakers because of what the Buses did to really, I mean, like like get the team extremely popular. I mean, it's always about the Lakers, and even when they have losing records, people still talk about the Lakers. I mean, even when they were terrible, it's like the I would say the closest thing would be like, the New York Yankees.
Mhm.
Like they're very similar franchises in the fact that regardless, they're spending a ton of money and they're always going to be in the conversation of sports regardless of it because of their past. So at the same time, it is LeBron, and being the head coach of LeBron always gets criticism because of people who love LeBron. And as much as people think, greatest of all time and everything else, oh, what if he had this coach? What if he really had this guidance? What if he had, these Pat Rileys? What if he had, Pops and every one of these all generational coaches? I mean,
Or like a
I
Phil
would
Jackson or someone of that
Yes,
caliber. Yes.
yes, exactly. And I think that's something that at the same time, he could go in there and he could be an extremely good coach. But I also think some of his credit at the same time is going to be snipped to how he builds the team around LeBron if LeBron stays, which is also kind of up in the air. Is he going to return to the Cavs for one more year? Is he really doing this, just to like draw him in, get his son coached up? Because Bronny is entering the draft. Will that be in discussions that Dan will be like, all right, I'll take over the team. You're giving me this like LeBron's going to help kind of get Dan into the NBA with probably more expensive deal. And people, I think, were saying and hypothetically speaking that it would be $100 million, which would put him at one of the top paid coaches. And he would really, take Bronny really with that Lakers pick where most people are thinking he's going to fall and coach him up and really do well for him. So there's a lot of politics, I guess, in that. But I would say it would be more pressure of being and more kind of rewarding of being the Lakers coach and doing it by yourself, as you could say, well, LeBron could win with any team.
Yeah. I mean, I guess this is what I'll say on the issue of what's the bigger draw, LeBron or LA. I do think that LA commercially as a franchise is one of the more appealing franchises that you could ever go to. Very similar to a New York Yankees or
The
um
Dodgers,
yeah,
even.
or Los Angeles Dodgers or whatever you want to call it, or the Dallas Cowboys, like one of those premier franchises that it's just going to be powerhouses in their respective leagues. I understand that, and it's amazing. And frankly, I think if this is the Utah Jazz or the Oklahoma City Thunder calling up Dan Hurley, I don't know if he's going to pick up the phone as quickly. I just don't.
Exactly.
I just don't think that that's going to be the case. So I think that the idea of LA is does present some allure to him, even though that I don't know if he necessarily wants to relocate his entire family from the East Coast, move them out there. I think that he is comfortable where he's at now. But if he has a chance to become attached to a historic franchise like that, I do think that is an impactful thing. However, I do think the idea to attach yourself more to a player like LeBron James and the cachet and the just all the fame and wealth and just all the success that he has attained, I think that does a whole lot for your career as well. I think that if you can get yourself in with him, potentially go on and win a championship, and if LeBron can recruit some guys to LA with your guidance, I think that sets you up for a great opportunity.
Yeah, and hopefully it can almost be like LeBron's going to take all these younger guys under his wing and be like, look, I'm doing all the drills as that veteran presence, being like, we're running all these crazy drills. LeBron's going to be first in line and they're going to be running it and they're going to be doing it.
Mhm.
And that's something, LeBron might do, kind of like a Phil Jackson, like with Mike, with what Mike did,
Yeah.
towards the end and being like, no, we're going to do stuff the way Phil wants to do it when Phil came in. So
Yeah. The only
I
thing
think
I'll
it could be like that.
The only thing I'll say though is that it's got to be that's a very tough decision to leave UConn because you have a chance to, you've established that your greatness there by winning two championships, but you have a real opportunity to turn them into a bona fide blue blood school to compete with guys like Duke, with the Kentuckies, and actually be those one of those premier always talked about franchises, which I think is something that Coach K was able to accomplish at Duke. You've seen it with Calipari um Kentucky, now going on to Arkansas. So I think that that is going to be a very difficult decision for him because you can go to the NBA and yeah, you have a shot to become a Phil Jackson or become one of these great all-time head coaches. but he already has the ability right now and is already looked at as one of the greater college coaches already in the sport. So he's going to have to really figure out what is going to be best for his image, his legacy, and who knows how this is going to end up turning out. But I am really interested on the fact that he's acknowledging to his team, hey, I'm going to go have these conversations. Nothing is official yet. So we're just going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, and I think that's a respect aspect as well. Just knowing that eventually if he's already in his head is saying, no, I'm not going to do it, he's going out there and he's looking at the call and he's doing all of that, just really kind of just to show that, just the respect in case the opportunity comes up again or whatnot. But I mean, it's just like, it's a really crazy kind of aspect because he could come back with a number and be like, all right, UConn, I want to stay here. Can you match it? And that's when it really turns on UConn and sees how much they can drive up the offer. And he can kind of do a little bit of a bidding process because, to be honest, what other options do the Lakers have, and what other options does UConn have? So I
Yeah.
think he finds himself in a really comfortable situation. But the the great part about being in college basketball is, and I personally think, is that
You
we
control
talk
everything.
about you control
As a
everything,
head coach, you are in
NIL.
control of everything. So I think that's a major factor. And, when you look at these college coaches like Calipari, he runs the entire operation. If you're a head coach in an NBA team, you have a general manager above you, you have an owner above you. And obviously at these schools, you're going to have a board of trustees and people that, will make choices with money. But you overall, as the coach, determine how you want to run your program for the most part. So that's a big thing that he's going to have to consider as well. But
Right.
I think as we do transition, we're gonna kind of move on to our last topic of the day. And this is something I don't think I've ever talked about in the history of the show before, but in WNBA news, there was some controversy. There was some controversy going around revolving Caitlin Clark and Chicago Sky player Chennedy Carter. Carter had a run in with Clark where she basically checked her. It was eventually reviewed and I think called a flagrant one foul after the fact. But a lot of controversy has come off of this since Clark's team I think, only has one win to this point since she's joined. And, there's been a lot of kind of speculation as to, is the league targeting her? Why are they being so hard on her at this point? Like, John, I know that you kind of brought this up to me, but what are your overall thoughts on this whole instance?
Well, I mean, this was a thing about her kind of going in about it. And she recently just commented on this a few days ago. And the quote says that sometimes it's saying so much this conversation is outside of basketball, not the product on the floor, and the amazing players that are on the floor and how good they are for their teams and how great this season has been for women's basketball. Kind of talking about like how she's getting criticized a lot and how everyone and even her teammates are being like, hey, like, let's not talk about it. Like, I don't want to answer any Caitlin Clark questions or
Mhm.
whatnot. And I know we were talking about this off air, but a big kind of aspect that you brought up was NIL. And I think that's a very big part that people are honestly overlooking, as myself did until you really brought it up. And I think it's just like people see it as she's the face of the league. I mean, even on the finals last night, we saw her in the Gatorade commercial that came out with her and Jason Tatum and Mbappe.
Yeah.
And
So
that's something they're really trying to like push.
yeah, and I think that frankly, while there are players in this league that right now are better than Caitlin Clark's overall talent, unfortunately, just like what she was able to accomplish in college, and it's not necessarily fair that some of these other athletes didn't have the opportunity to capitalize on it, but she's been able to play the social media game as well as anyone, and just her overall play in college, being the historic scoring season that it has been, um, just was enough to, I think, really move the needle and have a lot of people kind of become fans of her. And I think that it's going to be really difficult to, have people turn on her. Now, the only thing that can eventually do that is, I think, this rookie season, people are going to be very generous towards her and say, all right, yep, she's adjusting to the league. Oh, everyone's out to target her. But I think that if this kind of play continues maybe into a year two, I think that's when you can see people start to turn on an athlete and say, oh, maybe you're not as good as everyone thought you were. And Is that warranted? Who knows? We're gonna have to see how that all plays out. But I think that that's the direction that we're going in this point. Do I think that Caitlin Clark's gonna figure out? Yes, I do. Do I think that she's probably gonna have to? Unfortunately, probably gonna have to put on some muscle and have to like learn how to deal with some of these players like in their physicality. Yeah, I do. I think that's just gonna be how it works with the game. We saw it, compared to an NBA standpoint, we saw it with guys like Michael Jordan, where they went up against the Detroit Pistons early in his career, and he got just beat down, and eventually he learned, all right, if we want to deal with the bad boy Pistons, there's a whole scene in The Last Dance where they're like, we had to put on muscle, we had to get bigger and more physical, and they were able to get over that hump and go and win a championship. So I think that's what you'll eventually have to see from her. Also, just the Indiana Fever right now are just not an overall good team. So she's just going to need more help before that team is ready to take off and be successful. Because
Right.
even though that they have some good rookies in that class, it's still going to take time before that can all come together. I mean, she went to this team for a reason. They were the worst team in the league. And the thing with the WNBA too is that they don't factor in just the previous year, they factor in the previous 2 years. So it's based on your win percentage over the last 2 seasons. So they have perennially been a bad overall franchise. It might have a shot to end up with the first overall pick next year and take Paige Beckers. So who knows how this thing's going to turn out.
Exactly. And I mean, she even brought it up today during a shoot around, and she said in response, didn't mention any names, and just said, like, I just love playing basketball. All of this, as much as the controversy is, she was saying pretty much it's just part of my job.
Yeah.
And I'm not here for all the other stuff. That's not why my teammates are here. I really just want to play basketball, and they just really want to play basketball. And she's like, I understand. I just came into this league. I'm 22 years old, and there's a ton of expectations. And she said, I've kind of felt like I've grown a lot. And she said, like, this learning time is hard because she's a perfectionist. I mean, that's what she did at Iowa. She just won it.
Yeah.
And looking back on it, is she the face of the rookie class? I would say 100% based on jersey sales, ticket sales, audience watches, and everything else as the hype continues to grow around her. But I do think to a point it is a little weird where these other athletes who are kind of used to this exposure of or are getting used to this exposure of now kind of more televised games and more chartered flights, for example, and now you're seeing all the time the tunnel walkouts of all the WNBA players has really blown up, and it's getting more national coverage. And I think because of that, some players are like, all right, I need to make a name for myself, and will let their emotions kind of get the best of them as this is really their shot. As I don't think Caitlin Clark is going away anytime soon,
No.
but these players could be. So when they face her, they said, we're going to give it everything I got.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to end up seeing how this all plays out. I don't necessarily want to say like, oh, these players are going to go away anytime soon or anything like that, because I just frankly am not well informed enough to make that opinion. I just don't know enough and don't watch enough of the WNBA to make an opinion on it. I'm only reacting off some comments, some highlights that I've seen, and just that's where I stand on the whole issue at this time. But I I guess I'll say that I guess I'll say this like I want to see this league and see the girls be as competitive as they can be against someone like Caitlin Clark, do what they want. I don't want the league to be like, I know that everyone's like, oh, why are they going at her like this? I want this competitiveness, but I don't want it to be that there's like the animosity that everyone's like, oh, I just can't stand the fact that they're getting more attention than me. That if you want to get this attention, the spotlight's on her, but that means that everyone else is watching these games right now. If you go out and ball out, you're going to have a shot at this attention as well. So I hope that they can, capitalize on that and get all the exposure that they want and deserve.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I mean, yeah, it's really just like when you see like and you're facing like the best players, you're gonna have people that are gonna get up in your face and do what they do. And I mean, yeah, like that's really what it's gonna be. And again, Caitlin Clark is really just, I think, handling this very professionally as well as the other athletes of being like, we are the rookie class. We are gonna, we came here to play basketball and these storylines and even this shoving that made national media as in the Chicago news as borderline assault when it was just a flagrant one is as much as it is like kind of like wild, it's what the sport really needs for the WNBA to really
Yeah.
grow
Mhm.
as a league and hopefully, get more exposure.
Yeah, I mean, I wish it the best of luck with that. But we'll have to see how this all goes moving forward. But John, I think it is officially time to say that we are now down to the wire. So we're going to do a quick wrap up of what we talked about in this show and send you guys on your way. Once again, if once we're back on air at Bright University, you can listen to this show at WJMF 88.7 HD2 or live at WJMFradio.com. I just wanted to give that a quick shout out. And on today's episode, we talked about the Boston Celtics defeating the Dallas Mavericks in Game 1 of the NBA Finals by a final score of 107-89. We talked about just amazing performance of Kristaps Porzingis. I was almost going to say heroic, just with the way that he came off the bench and was going crazy. But I don't want to be speaking like too out of turn here. That's a little bit too pumped up. But we talked about that as well as Jaylen Brown's performance. Talked about Jason Tatum and what he's going to need to do to be more productive in Game 2. We also spoke on Kyrie Irving and Kyrie Irving struggles and Luka Doncic being held to only 1 assist. We also discussed the LA Lakers targeting UConn head men's basketball coach Dan Hurley to become their next guy. And we finished things off by talking about Caitlin Clark and the Kennedy Carter controversy. First of all, John, I just want to thank you so much for hopping back on the pod. Really do appreciate it. I know it's been some time since I've been on the air, but thank you so much, man.
Of course, of course. Hopefully this summer we can crank out some more.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you guys want to hear any more of the podcast, have some recommendations, please feel free to leave them in the comments of our Instagram. And from Down to the Wire, I'm Brian Costa,
And I'm John Warren.
and we hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Take care. Peace out.